All right. Well, welcome to New York Comic Con Metaverse Panel Time USA. It's a virtual Comic Con. We're doing this. This is a really big treat for us here at Oni Press. We have put out two really awesome comics, both about music, both about the 90s, but from very different lenses, but also have a lot of the same things to say. And that's Smoove City by Kenny Keil, which is this amazing fun run through classic New Jack Swing, and My Riot, which is this really like intimate portrait of young people during the Riot Girl movement in the Pacific Northwest. So we've got like the American South, we've got the Pacific Northwest, we have Black music, we have punk, which has historically always been seen as white, but we all know has a much more complicated history than that, right?
Yeah.
So we have here from Smoove City, writer, artist, letter designer, Kenny Keil, who you might know from Mad Magazine, Vibe Magazine, all that good stuff. And we also have Rick Spears and Emmett Helen of the amazing My Riot, an incredible team. They've both done incredible things in comics. I'm really excited to have all three of you in the same virtual room because you all kind of come from different corners of the comics world. So let's get into it. Let's see, Emmett, Rick, would you like to dive in a little bit more and set the stage for My Riot?
I think that's a great Rick thing to do,
okay,
since he wrote it, for sure.
Sure. Well, it's called My Riot, and it's a graphic novel about this girl, Val, who she sort of is growing up in this sort of really sort of average suburban middle-class world, and she starts to feel sort of unsatisfied with the way her life is going and the sort of choices that she's been making, and decides to start choosing some different things. They're a bit different for her, and introduced to punk rock music, and ends up forming a band. And this takes place in the 90s as a historical fiction, and we sort of follow along the trajectory of other sort of female-led bands at the time, which was part of this movement called the Riot Girl movement, where there were a bunch of different bands. And through doing that, through that experience, through making music and making art and traveling and being with these friends, she sort of finds out who she really is and how she wants to sort of live her life as she moves sort of from being this teenager into adulthood, or
Yep.
something.
No, for sure. That's it. Yeah, I'd have nothing to add to it. Really.
No,
I'm really not great at summarizing.
That was an excellent summary.
Yeah.
And
they're always kind of tough. There's a bit of an art to it, I think. If I like, I don't know, if you write them down, sometimes I can come up with something
Yeah.
really good. But
yes, it's true.
That's
And
great.
you won't believe what happens next. So Kenny, now that we've kind of learned a little bit more about like how we start with My Riot, do you mind like it is introducing people to the world of Smoove City?
Yes, Smoove City takes place sort of in an early 90s kind of fantasy world, following the explosion that was New Jack Swing, and taking you into sort of this post-New Jack Swing world of the early 90s, where hip-hop culture is going mainstream, R&B is forever changed, as along with everything else. My characters are Smoove City. They're an aspiring boy band. There's Ronnie, he's like the straight-laced, he's the bad boy. Ray is the straight-laced leader. You got Mikey, he's like the goofball, and you got Vinny, who's the shy one. Because basically at this time, when you were putting together a boy band, it was kind of like the Ninja Turtles. You had, each one had a distinct personality template. They had a color blazer. Everything was color-coded.
Yeah.
You knew who they
special
were.
Weapon, special color.
Exactly.
The topping, yes. Very.
So they're like that just in their daily life when the story begins. They have this dream of R&B pop stardom. They want to be the most successful boy band in the world. They record a demo tape at the mall karaoke booth. Just sure that's going to get them the record deal and make all their dreams come true. I don't want to spoil too much. We'll just say the demo tape goes one way, they go another, and they find that they are not the easily packaged group that everyone thinks they are. The adult world sees them a certain way. The record industry sees them a certain way. Law enforcement sees them a certain way. But really, they're just kids. And they've got all kinds of emotions and all kinds of facets to them that they're going to be discovering in this sort of coming of age story. And ultimately, I think, yeah, it's about learning to sort of find harmony in the midst of tension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's what my Riot is about too. It's so fascinating that these two completely different books have the same themes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
yeah,
precisely. So much so we even did an educator written discussion guide for both books. So there will be a lot of students learning about both books as their way into understanding like 90s culture and sociopolitical stuff. It's fascinating. So kind of on that note, like what inspired y'all to tell the exact stories you decided to tell in these worlds? Starting with Rick.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly where. I never really know exactly where the ideas come from. You sort of kick around a bunch, and I'm really hard on ideas because I sort of know at this point how far they have to go ultimately, you know. So if it's just sort of shiny, that's not gonna work. But I just started thinking about. I mean, I've written about music a lot. I did for Oni. I did 3 volumes of the black metal book, which is obviously about black metal and
I've always, one of our most famous series, black metal.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I listen to music all the time when I'm working, when I'm not working, I just in the car, wherever. And it's just something that's always on my mind. And I think I was just looking for, I don't know. My wife and I were trying to have a baby, and I was sure all my friends had little girls, and I was just sure that we were going to have a little girl. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll write something. So, when I'm all old and she's a teenager, that I'll be like, no, I was cool once. Here it is. I promise. And then, but I think that's sort of where it came from, that sort of thing, that, writing something that I could share. And then also, I'd done a book. My first book was called Teenagers from Mars, and it was about this guy who did a comic book, and it was sort of riffing on Mike Diana, who was a real comic book artist who got arrested for obscenity, and they sort of told him he wasn't allowed to do art anymore. It was just it really affected me, and so I sort of was thinking about, well, what would I do if that happened to me in that book. And in the story, the making character goes to get his book back from the government, and he's got machine guns and rubber bullets and all this stuff. And I was reading an interview with Kathleen Hanna, who's the leader, the singer of Kenny Keil, and she was talking about this macho idea of revolution, that the sort of the guy way to do it, the macho way to do it, is to grab your gun and to go just shoot the problem, And she was like, cool, but as soon as you do that, you are acting crazy and you're going to go to jail or you're going to get killed, or you know what I mean? It's not a sustainable way to be sort of radical.
Right. It's a good point, and it speaks to the feminism that drives the Riot Girl movement, right? Because so much of our societal upheavals have been led by or torn down by men. So of course our idea of revolution is going to be sort of inspired by male power fantasies,
and I felt
the Che Guevara airbrushes and stuff.
and I totally bought in all that, and so I really felt I don't know if called out's the right word, but I felt I was I've been making assumptions that I don't think are accurate. and I need to like sort of re-examine this. And then it was about the same time she'd done another band called La Tigra. And I forget which record it is, but on the back of the record, it has all these little drawings of things to use in a revolution, right? And it's like Scotch tape, crayons, you know,
yeah, those are the weapons.
record.
Of the revolution.
It's all this stuff to make art, you know. And I was just like, this. I was like, this is something. This is it. It ties in this place I'm already trying to go, but it's a way I just haven't thought about it before. And I was interested in then, you know, exploring that in a story, and it started to make sense to do a Riot Grrrl book.
That's great. I mean, this is like another great example of how comics and zine culture, you know, paper, staples, Sharpies, whatever you've got lying around, like that the accessibility and the urgency of those needs, like create explosive art. And like, I'm forgetting who is attributed to this quote, but the role of the artist is to make revolution irresistible. And that's like such a great example of ways really that art inspire us to use art to make the change. Yeah, that's great. What about you, Kenny? How did you start? Like, what was the germination of the idea? How were you inspired? I mean, I know you very well, so I have some ideas, but tell everybody else.
The germination of the idea was that I wanted to do a boy band R&B group that was also super spies. And when I told my wife, Ro, that idea, she was like, you're doing too much. Like, you work in music, you know how the stories of the bands themselves are enough. Why don't you just talk about that? And I was like, oh dang, you're right. So we lost the other thing. And then I just sort of did a deep dive into kind of what I know now, having sort of worked in facets of the music industry versus the perceptions that were sold in the mainstream. And that's sort of like a tension point throughout the whole book. Like, what's the perception? What's the reality? I think it's important to have that kind of media literacy, even when you're just having fun with pop music. So from there, you know, it was real natural for me to take things like I'm a product of watching too many music videos. So thinking of music in terms of visual narrative, those are already hand in hand. I don't think that that's weird. Putting comedy and music together, well, that's in Living Color, that's SNL, that's Def Comedy Jam, that's Uptown Comedy Club. These things are already seamlessly integrated into my mind because so much of the New Jack Swing explosion was about taking everything that had come before and like mixing it all together. But it's interesting to hear Rick speak about politics and man stuff. We're gonna work out our issues on this panel. Watch out. You know, like this music was not overtly political, but if you consider it against the arc of American history, world history, music history, you know, the fact that this was Black art, it's being made by Black artists, it's being owned, you know, by Black business people, it's being presented as such. They're not hiding it behind a different, you know, a generation before, if the Isley Brothers put out a record, they'd slap like a white couple on the beach on the cover. This wasn't that. This wasn't that. So just by existing and having a good time is sort of a political act in itself. And where it clicked with me, I think, was that it was that, and it reached this multicultural audience all over the world. It's still going. You look at K-pop now. It has not stopped. But for me, I think especially growing up in the South, where like everything's segregated, but then we're part of this new generation we're going to house parties together. We're going to school together. So you've got, the history's right there. The history hasn't gone away, but you got this little glimpse of the future. You got this little piece of hope. And the music's just sort of the soundtrack to all that. That's kind of like the macro political element that I would tie my book to. But then on the personal thing, you got me thinking about all the media that I would have come up with as a little kid in the 80s, as a child, and then a young man in the 90s, and it's all He-Man, G.I. Joe, Rambo, and I love rap, but, you know, Ice Cube didn't mention it was cool to cry. I had to get that somewhere else. That was like, oh, I'm listening to Jodeci. They're dressed in black leather vests on a sand dune, singing about crying. And it's like, okay, like on a personal, sensitive kid level, I was like, okay, it's okay to be that. It's okay to have those feelings, and it can even be kind of cool and stylish.
Yeah, isn't it funny
Yeah.
how the aesthetics are huge triggers for the mainstream? Like, so you know, I won't get too academic here, but there is a difference in the way white supremacy politics sees tidiness and upward mobility. And the late 80s, we were finally getting to a time where there was like certain Black folk who were starting to like go to the mall and have cell phones and like be lawyers and have cosmopolitan jobs. And New Jack Swing was a cosmopolitan music genre. It was about, we're here. Of course it would scare people, right? It's like, of course the suburbs are gonna clutch, like you're gonna go to our mall. But and then conversely with my Riot, the punk, grunge, Riot Girl, it's all about the unkeptness, the anarchy, the untidiness, the rejecting of white purity, cleanliness, at least in aesthetic, right? Like I'm gonna be in the gutter, I've got spikes, I don't wash my hair, and we are just partying all night, and we don't care what the parents think. And like that's another form of threat that's like coming from the inside of the house, right? And so like you have this kind of hilarious double whammy in music culture in the 90s where like there was a lot of pearl clutching on both sides.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy how New Jack Swing and Riot Girl pissed the same people off for different reasons. So I'm curious, like you talked really eloquently about your personal connection to these stories, and like we're even getting to some really fascinating gender stuff. So I want to get into the art, how all of this plays out in the way that the characters are written, and how the art is being drawn, and how emotion is being shown on the page. So I'd love to hear more about the art choices that were made from Emmett, especially about My Riot, if you have any cool stuff to share there.
Sure. So I came from the opposite end of like music knowledge as Rick and Kenny. I did not grow up with music. I grew up in a really conservative house. So we didn't have access to sort of like pop music or anything that was mainstream or secular is what they called it. And so I didn't have all this stuff. It was just like, you know, choked out of me. You know, going through teenage years and stuff, I really didn't have an outlet for self-expression besides just drawing for myself. So as an adult, you know, I felt like I really kind of missed out on that kind of stuff. So, but for the visual portion, you know, so I had like this really personal connection to it. So I really wanted to do something that felt authentic and special. And I also felt insecure that I was not going to be able to pull it off because I didn't have like an insider's kind of understanding of it. But I started going to shows. I started listening to a lot of music. I started reading a lot of zines. I would go to I'd find these like little bookstores around town and go in there and see if they had a zine collection. And so I just started like chomping on all of this different stuff to try to figure out like what makes this tick, and was so delighted and fascinated by every facet of it. But so with the zines and the shows, what I really wanted to capture was not really visuals, but feeling, if that's not too like hoity-toity artist talk.
No, not at all. And I think that's something that My Riot does so well. Like on the page, you can really kind of feel angst, you can feel passion, you can, you know, you can kind of feel the vibrations on the page.
Yeah. And it's a story that's so centered around this one person. You know, Val, she's number one. The story follows her the entire way through the book. We, you know, besides we cut away a little bit to talk about her parents sometimes, which is awesome. I really love the scenes with her mom. But for the most part, it follows her and her perspective and development through this point in her life. And so the art style changes just a little bit throughout the course of that as her perspective on the world changes. At the beginning, like the line work is a little bit tighter and finer, not too much, but hopefully enough to make an impact. As she then goes into the punk environments, everything gets kind of chunky and messy. And then by the end of the book, it's really, really finessed as she figures out like who she is and, you know, gains confidence. So there was like a lot of stuff coming in for the visual language of the book. There was the influence of actual like punk materials visually. There was influence of trying to take a punk sound and translate that into line work. I didn't read a lot of other comic books about punk music because I didn't want it to look like a book about punk music. I wanted it to look like punk music, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's one of the things I love most about the way the book looks is there are a lot of books about punk, and they do have more of like a, you know, pictorial kind of graphic look. There's always this more journalistic feeling to it, like we're telling you about it, and you really are immersed as Val in My Riot, and your many choices influenced by the music are just so clever and really reinforce that.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, that was the zine influence a lot of times comes into punk comics, and those are beautiful, and I read a lot of them to be informed. But I think that for a mainstream audience, there has to be some amount of conventionality to make it more approachable to the people that it's written for. You know, this is not really a book written for people who are already punks. This is a book written for a kid like Val who doesn't really know the world very much. So I wanted to make sure that it was accessible in that space.
Yeah, it reads that way. I think it's tricky when you want to do something about like a historical cultural movement, you know, for the babies, for the Zoomers, because you just don't know if it's going to reach them the way you want it to. Like, are we speaking the same language? But I think a lot of it, thanks to Rick's writing approach, really makes it very accessible. So yeah, that's really great. And by the way, just shout out to late bloomers in general. Like, I know, as all like we're all nerds. I was definitely one of those nerds who like was not allowed to go outside until like 18.
Yeah, 19. Absolutely.
So yeah, like my brother and I discovered zines and shows around the same time. Awesome. Way late. How about you, Kenny? I want. There are just so many really funny and obscure, but also like just like cool references visually and in the dialogue in Smoove City. Do you mind like just kind of taking folks through like a fun run of some of your favorite anecdotes and references that made it through in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the book opens with pretty much a very clear cut like parody of Soul Train. And you know, that was a huge part of television. You had Don Cornelius, who had been doing this job for a very long time, and it's always so funny to me watching him interview these younger guys. You know, that you can kind of tell his interest is waning a little bit in what they're doing, but there, you know, there's so much energy. There's just the way the show was introduced, the format is still there. Then there's everything, you know, they're hanging out in malls a lot. That was just such a huge part of youth culture at that time. If you can put the words mall and culture together, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. The fact that they record their tape in a karaoke booth, I feel like the younger generation will probably look at that and be like, what's a tape? Possibly even what's a mall? I don't know.
Listen, there's a nesting doll of references.
Exactly.
You're gonna have to get through.
But, I mean, that was part of how it could be done. Studio time's expensive. No one has a computer at their house. Definitely not one capable of recording. So, you know, one of my favorite anecdotes, real life anecdotes, is Mary J. Blige recording a demo at a mall karaoke booth. It gets to Uptown Records and a star is born.
It's so cool.
That actually happened.
Mary, Queen Mary.
Exactly. That actually happened. It doesn't work out that clearly for them. They sort of wind up losing the tape, but not losing the tape because you can make copies of tape. So I sort of explore what would a viral hit look like in 1993. It's not like we weren't sharing information. We're dubbing tapes. I was the king of Dub Me That. I know my friends were sick of me. If I bring you a blank tape, where was I getting all these blank tapes?
Radio Shack.
Yeah,
exactly.
We got to a point at one time where my dad took me to get blank cassettes, and like an actual Wham cassette tape was cheaper than the blank. Yeah, it's just like, wow. Times
and yeah, so they end up sort of finding someone who believes in them in this intern at this record label. Who he's going to pretend he's someone bigger than he is. He's going to sign them for this tour. He's trying to prove himself. He's not giving them the whole story. And then it takes them through the South because, like you said, New Jack Swing is real cosmopolitan, but like the audience wasn't entirely. Everybody was listening to it, so I had to think about the venues. I don't know what a club in Harlem looks like in 1989, but I know what the BYOB club looks like in 1997 in Louisiana. So I sort of had them travel through the kind of venues where I would have been first experiencing music. These guys are maybe a half generation older than me. So that was kind of interesting because now I'm older than them. But these were like the cool kids on the bus that I looked up to as a little kid.
Yeah.
And now I have this other perspective on them. But I think one of my favorites is Mikey's first time in the club.
Yes. It's such a great scene.
Mikey has been dreaming of going to the club his entire life. He's seen it he's heard about it sung in songs like Legend. He's seen the music videos that represent this sort of idealistic vision of the club. And then he makes up a song on the moment about being in all the things he's going to do when he gets in the club. And then he gets in the club, he's like, oh, it's just a bunch of like old sad people standing around in the dark.
Yeah, just like showing up to a bar is just like, oh, a club is just a bar.
Exactly.
There's no food.
Oh, I get it now.
Yeah, add vibe to a bar and you have club.
Yeah. So that was and that came from my own memories and even like my own conversations with friends as we're older, looking back on just sort of, here's what you thought it was going to be, and then here's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Both books are rich with so much good metaphor, good reference. I think on the narrative tip, I'd love to learn more from Rick about the sort of what you wanted us to learn through Val, through this world of the Riot Grrrl movement.
Well, I think learn. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just
or experience. I suppose is a better word.
Well, I mean, I think it's about finding your way. I mean, everybody, one way or the other, you find your way. And sometimes it's real tough, and sometimes I don't know. It seems easy for some other people. I don't know, I think it's always pretty tough, but you've always got to sort of find your way. And I like stories like that. I like to write about teenagers a lot. I like to write about kids growing up because I think there's this, like kids believe in magic and all kinds of stuff. They believe in everything, and I think that's so wonderful. And as you become an adult, you start to shed some of that just because of, just responsibility, paying your mortgage or your rent. These certain things just require a practicality that they can tamp some of that stuff down. But I think teenagers are still in this sort of this great zone where they've got a little bit of each side, and they've got it, and it's sort of like a battle, like which is going to win. And then when you're an adult, hopefully you've been able to maintain some of that magic, some of that stuff. And I think that's, I don't know about Val, but for me, by writing books like that, I feel like I retain some of that. I remember some of these things about when I was a kid, and it helps me not forget and not become stale and stuck, you know, and stiff, but to remain flexible and to you know, think deeply about things, both the future and memory and stuff like that. And I think, you know, with Val, I mean, I don't know, it's because she's very much me in a lot of ways, and she's very much my wife in a lot of ways. And I don't know.
if I can interject,
yeah.
I think something that's really nice about the book is that Rick didn't go in being like, okay, this is the message and we're gonna program the children who read this book. There's like a distinct lack of sort of thematic overtones. You know, stuff is kind of messy, like a lot of stuff doesn't get resolved, or it resolves like surprisingly quick, and that happens in real life. And so
life is messy.
Yeah, and so I think it allows the reader to take their own meaning from it, because like Rick said, the meaning is like, or the theme is, you know, that everybody's got their own way of doing things. And so when I read the script for the first time, I was really excited at the idea of this getting in front of someone like how I was as a teenager, and for them to be introduced to the idea that there's different ways to grow up in different places you can do that.
Yeah, and I you know, just one thing about Im's art is it's always the acting that I'm so blown away with, because you know, you sort of, I mean, it's for us, we're a team, right? So I'm doing the script and Im's doing the art, and then when the pages would come in, you know, and you start to see the acting coming through, so it's not just the line being said or whatever and just mouth is open, but Im's put in all of this life, you know, and to me that's it just, and then I'll do the lettering too, and so like, and that's always my favorite part, because especially when you just have the script's the script and it just sort of sits there, you know, and you have the art and the art's there, but when you put them together, you know, that's when it's comics, that's when it's not illustration and it's not writing, it's this third thing, and just seeing some of the stuff come together was just such a joy, you know, to watch that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like magic happening before your eyes, that seeing your script turn into that. And yeah, it's true about acting in comics. It's so important. And in My Riot, you can see the feelings behind the eyes and the characters, and it, you know, brings forth a feeling that maybe you had at that time. And I think that's and kind of bridging it with Mikey's sad realization about the club is like, you know, the teenage years where we're learning what's real and what isn't, and what's our feelings and what's just the way shit is, and what and just like what we want to believe in. And both books play with that a lot, and ultimately it's, be true to yourself. Do you know what you want, and are you free? You know, how do you seek your own liberation? That's fascinating stuff. And I would love to also hear a little bit more from Kenny, just about, because we know Em and Rick had this really like clean team up. You were kind of from the beginning doing every stage of the project. Were there some experiences through that where you learned a lot about transposing music to comics, and anything else about your process?
For sure, I learned a lot. This is my first graphic novel. This is the longest project I've ever done. I had you, Amanda, now be shy, but if you hadn't guided the process, this would still be like an 8-page mini comic on my hard drive. So I never
power of editors.
I didn't feel, look, I'm not an auteur. I need all the help I can get. Thank you. But yeah, you know, I'm really connecting a lot with Emmett, what you're saying. You know, we have this challenge. There's no sound in comics. There's no getting around it. But then you think about, well, what's music really doing? Well, it's something's going on in your brain chemistry. There's emotions it's stirring up. So I don't have the music. How else can I get to that emotion? I can't tell you how it sounds. I know how it sounds. I'm singing it while I'm drawing. It's best if you don't hear. Make up your own. That's great. But yeah, you gotta tie into those emotions some other way. and revisiting those feelings. And the good thing is music doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not just like, hey, we invented a new sound. Well, no, there's a million other things happening. This fashion is changing, right? The venues look a certain way. Everything has its own world. So I had all kinds of other visual cues that I could play off of. You try to do things with the lettering to make it clear when someone's talking versus when someone's singing. I tried to make things look like they were vibrating. Of course, I'm dealing with this different aesthetic, which is a lot cleaner. So I tried to I was looking at like a lot of Archie comics. I like just the youthful innocence of it. I like the clean, and even what Love and Rockets sort of built off some of those storytelling techniques, where and music is baked into the DNA of it, even when that particular story or sequence isn't about music. So those were the challenges, and then you just have the challenges on top of that of just staying on top of schedule. Being that I do write and draw, I'll outline the plot. I'll just kind of script shorthand while I'm sketching. And it's kind of like having a collaborator, because then when I go back to the page, I can't read my handwriting anymore, and I forgot what I was thinking. So then I have to sort of figure out what that guy was talking about. I think it brings a little magic.
That's so real though, yeah.
Yes, the true magic comes in forgetting your idea and then trying to re-remember it and kind of backwards engineering your way toward it.
Yeah.
What tells you that?
Oh man, that is so funny. Yeah, I'm so grateful for all three of you guys talking about this. Is like, I feel like we could talk about this forever. I would love for you both to both of you writers tell me a little bit more about the music, because Kenny just mentioned the vibration effect that he put on his lettering during the singing, and in my Riot we also have like different styles of lettering and visual cues. So I was just curious if you guys talk a little bit more about, in the scripting side, how did that feel?
Well, I mean, for my Riot, well, first of all, on the lettering, like I when I said earlier, I said I did the lettering. I do the boring lettering. I do the lettering in just the balloon with the tail. But Emmett did all of the cool lettering, all of the songs,
Yeah,
all of the stuff that's got life to it. That was
well,
their
it takes
work.
two. You need that contrast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. For me, well, my challenge in the writing was because we had a few songs. I wrote some songs, and that was really tough to like. I mean, they weren't like sort of full songs, but there's sections where they're singing, and that was really tough for me. Just because, I mean, it's gotta be right, it's gotta sound right, it's gotta really work. And I think I hit it where I had a song all about my dog, where most of the singing was barking, and I just in that one I was like, but that's the fun, that's the, like, every song's not going to be serious and like political and all, some of them, sometimes that's where your energy is, and sometimes your energy is just like, however it is, and that's when I like loosened up, and I was like, okay, like this will be cool, this will work out.
I forgot about the concert scenes and those splashes. That was like one of my earliest stylistic decisions, was to cut out the panels and do it right, like, or was that in the script, Rick, to have like everything on one page, not panels?
No, I think I don't remember exactly. I think I would have paneled everything.
Okay. Yeah, so at some point we decided to drop the panel borders and do kind of just like a thing, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to make it look like music. I read a bunch of books that have music in them, and it's just, it always feels like there's some like vacuum. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, and they can handle it really.
There's something missing, and you just kind of
like you're not reading it. Yeah, you're not reading it in rhythm. You don't know what it sounds like tonally or anything. So what I wanted to do instead was take the aesthetic quality of like zines and their kind of use of like cut and paste typography and stuff, and make something that looked and felt like that. So it was at least like looked cool and was fun to look at. because I knew I wasn't going to be able to make it look like music.
Yeah, I guess there's wisdom in that, right? Of like knowing I know I can't make it look like this. So
Right.
now you need to create a whole new way. And that's how you get such cool splash pages like that. I had never really seen that way of drawing a musical scene. So both books do it so differently, and yet they both feel so right for the music they're doing. Let's see, we're almost out of time, so I just want to give you guys a chance to say whatever you'd like to say, like what you hope readers, how you hope readers enjoy Smoove City and My Riot, respectively, and what do you hope they'll take with them when they listen to music in the future? I'm just very curious what you would think of that.
I hope that a teenager reads My Riot and it just like opens up the world for them. You know, and music is such a great conduit for getting different perspectives in your life, and it's so accessible too. Like, you know, you can go on Spotify now and type in Kenny Keil and you can listen to this music. So I hope that it just opens up like another door for someone maybe to expressing themselves, and also a temptation to look into history of feminist movements, because even though the book is set within the Riot Girl stuff, it's not really like, it's not about the movement. It's about a girl who happened to exist alongside during the movement. So yeah, I hope that it kind of gets kids interested in the historical aspect, as well as doing something nice for them personally.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I hope that, I mean, you know, you get emails every now and then when people find your work, you know, and then they tell you, you know, sometimes they say it meant something to them or whatever, and that always just, it means so much to me. So I hope people find it. I hope it opens that possibility of doing music or doing art or doing something to express yourself. And you know, you can be political, it doesn't have to even be political, but just that you're able to speak from your heart, you know, and you're able to engage with the world in a way that is fulfilling, you know. And I hope that this, you know, that would be cool. I also, you know, the mom side of it was sort of a surprise for me, her relationship with her mom, and it'd be interesting too if parents read it, because I think there's a sort of a secondary story there of being a parent, and watching your kid sort of find themselves, and you know, and ultimately sort of having to let them do that. That to me was sort of a surprise, but
yeah, super empathetic towards mom in a way that totally doesn't make sense for a teenage book typically. You know, she's not an antagonist, and I think that that's really special. But yeah,
that's great. I think we fall into a lot of traps in YA, especially when it comes to parents. They're either non-existent or they're kind of positioned as foils or antagonists, or people to not trust. And I think seeing stories that show like the more realistic, messy reality of all of that just makes everyone seem more human and sympathetic, and you can start to see your own family members in it. Yeah, I think that's really on point, of just living authentically, and also knowing that you yourself are living in history too. You know, like we are living in our own Riot Girl movement. We are living in our own, you know, moral panic moment. Like, you know,
do a good job, because someone might write a book about you soon. So.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, Kenny, what about you? Similar thing.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of sharing an agenda here. This is
really baby. Radicalize the youth.
First and foremost, you know, I hope you read my book and you have a good time. I hope you laugh. It was definitely a hard couple years as I conceived it and worked on it. The book became sort of this joyful escape for me. I hope it functions for readers the same way, if nothing else. I want you to laugh. I want you to have your favorite member of the group like you would with a real group. I want you to connect with the characters, right? But on a deeper level, I'm right there with you. This is about becoming yourself, and giving others space to do the same.
Mhm.
We keep touching on this politics thing, but just finding some joy and working together that can be like a revolution in itself. So
Yes.
if it resonates on that deeper level, that's great too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, I love all of this. I can't wait for all the teens to read these books and for us to start a whole new movement. So while we wrap up, Rick, Emmett, could you share where people can find you on the internet, and other things you want to drop, promote?
Sure. So I'm Emmett Helen Art on Twitter. Emmett is spelled with 2 T's. You'd probably be able to find me. But I have a Rick and Morty mini series coming out in October as well, called Rick and Morty Ever After. Working with Sarah Stern on that one, alternating issues. It's written by Sam Maggs. It's very funny and very cute, and the book is beautiful, which we're really excited about the aesthetics of the book.
Yeah, no coincidence, by the way. Yeah, by the way, this is an Oni Press title.
Yes, it is an Oni Press
Please
title.
pre-order. Please tell your comic book store to pre-order.
But I do have a series that I'm working on that's unannounced, and then I feel like there's one more thing, but I can't remember. So you can talk.
I have an Oni Press book as well, the auteur that we did a little while ago, but we're working on turning that into a television show right now, and I'm working on that.
Oh, cool.
With Taika Waititi and Jude Law.
It's gonna be so cool.
So it's kind of crazy, but yeah, so that's keeping me busy. But yeah, and then when working on new stuff, it's too early, but new stuff in the works too.
Yeah.
All right, cooking in the lab. All right, what about you, Kenny?
Always in the lab. Always in the lab. Mostly just cooking up tweets these days. Twitter, Kenny Keil. No comics to speak of. I'm on break. Drew one.
Yeah, you're on a post.
Just drew one. What are you asking me? What else am I doing? Resting.
Existing.
So watch out for the auteur and read Rick and Morty.
That's right. And let's make sure, if you haven't already pre-ordered your Smoove City and My Riot, get on that. The 2 books will be out in October this year. Keep your eye out and go on Amazon if you have to. Bookshop.org. Wonderful. You can buy things directly from your own local store. IndieBound is also good too. I've been Amanda. I'm one of the editors at Oni Press, which I realized I didn't say at the beginning. Hello and goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us. And please visit onipress.com for more info on any of this.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Yay.